What if everything you think you know about Bruce Lee is only half the story? The world remembers the dragon, the lightning-fast punches, the legendary physique, the fearless stare, the philosophy, the movies that changed martial arts cinema forever. But Bruce Lee wasn't born as the perfect icon we remember today. Behind the legend was a man who could be stubborn, impatient, intensely competitive, frustrated by rejection, and obsessed with becoming better. He fought opponents, but he also fought stereotypes. He fought injuries. He fought financial uncertainty. He fought the expectations of Hollywood. And perhaps most importantly, he fought himself. These are 10 lesser-known truths and difficult chapters from Bruce Lee's life that reveal the human being behind the myth. 10. Bruce Lee was a troublemaker before he became a philosopher. It's hard to imagine Bruce Lee as a teenager getting into trouble. But before he became famous for discipline, he had a reputation for being rebellious and getting involved in street fights. Bruce grew up in Hong Kong and entered the entertainment world as a child actor. But as he became a teenager, his competitive nature became increasingly intense. Fighting wasn't simply something he saw in movies. It was becoming part of his real life. Eventually, his family became concerned about his behavior. Martial arts offered Bruce something he desperately needed: discipline. He began training in Wing Chun under Ip Man, and something changed. Instead of allowing his aggression to control him, Bruce began turning it into training. Every punch became repetition. Every mistake became something to analyze. Every weakness became something to eliminate. 9. Bruce Lee wasn't always Hollywood's dream actor today. It seems impossible to imagine Hollywood without Bruce Lee. But Hollywood didn't immediately know what to do with him. Bruce had the looks. He had charisma. He could fight. He spoke English. He could act. And he had an extraordinary screen presence. But there was one problem. Hollywood often had a very narrow idea of what an Asian actor was supposed to be. Bruce didn't want to play stereotypical characters. He didn't want to remain a supporting figure whose only purpose was to demonstrate martial arts. He wanted to be the hero. That ambition created frustration. His breakthrough as Kato in the Green Hornet made him recognizable, but it didn't give him the career he wanted. 8. His confidence could also become confrontational. Bruce Lee is often portrayed as calm and philosophical, but there was another side to his personality. He could be extremely confident, sometimes intensely so. Bruce believed strongly in his abilities and wasn't afraid to challenge established ideas. He questioned traditional martial arts systems. He criticized rigid thinking, and he wasn't interested in accepting something simply because people had been doing it for generations. His philosophy was built around experimentation. 7. Bruce Lee was obsessed with his own physical limitations. Bruce Lee's body became one of the most famous physiques in the world, but what people rarely understand is how much work went into maintaining it. Bruce wasn't naturally satisfied with his physical ability. He constantly experimented. Strength training, conditioning, flexibility, speed, endurance, nutrition, technique. He wanted to understand exactly what his body could do, but there was a darker side to that obsession. Bruce pushed himself extremely hard. His body was not a machine, and in 1970 he suffered a serious back injury that temporarily threatened his ability to train normally. For a martial artist whose career depended on physical performance, this could have been devastating. 6. Bruce Lee didn't just want to be famous. Bruce Lee wanted success, but fame wasn't enough. He wanted control over his career. He wanted to influence the way Asian characters were represented, and he wanted to make movies on his own terms. This became increasingly obvious when he returned to Hong Kong. Instead of accepting whatever roles were offered to him, Bruce became more involved in the creative process. He wanted to write, direct, choreograph, perform, and shape the stories himself. That ambition eventually produced The Way of the Dragon, where Bruce had much greater creative control. This is one reason Bruce Lee's career was so unusual. He wasn't content to simply become a famous actor. 5. The famous body wasn't as invincible as people thought. Bruce Lee looked almost superhuman, but the reality was very different. His body experienced injuries. He had medical problems. And in 1973, he experienced a serious health crisis before his death. On May 10th, while working on Enter the Dragon, Bruce became seriously ill and collapsed. He was taken to hospital. Doctors diagnosed cerebral edema, swelling of the brain. Bruce recovered and eventually returned to work. But that episode should have been alarming. He was only 32. He was physically active, and yet something had caused his brain to swell severely enough to require emergency treatment. 4. His philosophy came from real struggles. Bruce Lee's famous philosophy is often reduced to inspirational quotes. Be like water. Adapt. Absorb what is useful. But these ideas weren't simply motivational slogans. They came from Bruce's own struggles. He experienced rejection. He faced cultural barriers. He dealt with injuries. He questioned traditional martial arts. And he had to repeatedly reinvent himself. That's why adaptability became so important to him. Bruce learned that refusing to change could become a weakness. When Hollywood wasn't giving him the opportunities he wanted, he changed direction. When an injury stopped his normal training, he studied. When traditional martial arts seemed too rigid, he developed new ideas. 3. Bruce Lee's success came with enormous pressure. By 1973, Bruce Lee was becoming one of the biggest martial arts stars in the world. But success doesn't automatically remove pressure. Sometimes it creates more. Bruce had expectations from fans, expectations from filmmakers, expectations from himself. Every new movie had to be bigger. Every performance had to be better. Every physical achievement added to the image he was expected to maintain. And Bruce had something else to worry about: his future. He wasn't satisfied with simply repeating the same kind of movie. He wanted more creative control. He wanted to make films that could reach international audiences. He wanted to continue developing his martial arts philosophy. 2. His death was surrounded by questions. July 20th, 1973. Bruce Lee was in Hong Kong. Earlier that day, he met producer Raymond Chow to discuss Game of Death. Later, Bruce visited actress Betty Ting Pei. At some point, he complained of a headache. He was given Equagesic, a painkiller containing aspirin and meprobamate. Bruce went to lie down. He never woke up. He was eventually taken to Queen Elizabeth Hospital. He was pronounced dead. Bruce Lee was only 32. The coroner attributed his death to cerebral edema associated with a hypersensitivity reaction to the medication. But because the death was so sudden and Bruce was so young and apparently fit, questions immediately followed. Over the decades, theories involving heat, medication, cannabis, metabolic problems, and other factors appeared. More recently, researchers have even proposed that hyponatremia, dangerously low blood sodium associated with excessive water intake, could potentially explain the brain swelling. But this remains a retrospective hypothesis. It is not the same as proving what happened. 1. Bruce Lee never got to finish. Becoming Bruce Lee. This may be the most heartbreaking truth of all. Bruce Lee died at 32. Think about that age. He wasn't an elderly legend looking back on a finished career. He was still becoming himself. His film career was exploding. His influence was spreading internationally. His ideas were still developing. He was working on Game of Death. He had ambitions beyond martial arts movies. He had already changed the way the world saw Asian actors and martial artists. But he had no opportunity to see how far his influence would eventually reach. We can imagine what might have happened. Maybe he would have directed more films. Maybe he would have created new martial art systems. And what happens when you finally decide to adapt? That's why Bruce Lee still matters. Not because he was perfect, but because he never stopped trying to become better. The world remembers the dragon, but behind the dragon was a human being. And maybe that human story is even more fascinating than the legend. If you enjoyed this deeper journey behind Bruce Lee's legendary image, subscribe to Fact Matrix for more untold stories, dark facts, mysteries, and hidden chapters from the lives of history's most fascinating people. Because here at Fact Matrix, we don't just tell the story, we uncover what's hiding behind it.